You've worked on a number of clinical trials. Can you give us like a real world example of of a trial you worked on and the outcomes that trial had?
Sure. Um, First of all, again, I give props to Leah. She did a great job, and it's a wonderful service of what the Leukemia Society is doing. And to Mel, who advocated for himself. So I'm a very strong proponent on helping people to advocate for themselves. We should not be waiting until we have a disease to feel like we should advocate for ourselves. So I work primarily inside of a large medical center with patients that have end-stage heart disease. Not everybody is going to get a transplant. That's what we'd like, but some people actually are not eligible for transplants. My curious question was, what, why shouldn't we spend some time on prevention, right? Because the fundamental underpinnings for African Americans versus Caucasians or Black versus white patients for developing end stage disease can be different. And probably the most prevalent reason for end stage disease in African Americans is hypertension.
Hmm.
And hypertension doesn't hurt. So I don't know I have the problem. And maybe I checked my blood pressure and it was high, but then it was low too. So I don't know what that means. So what, right?
Right.
And so this silent disease, which is could be intervened upon and should be intervened upon before you get to end stage disease and all the dilemmas associated with that, is what motivated me to do some community based research. And I did it in the church space. I was interested in hypertension prevention. And the way I did that, and when I say I, it's really a team of us that did it, was it first starts with myself and one of the community outreach people at Cedar Sinai going to a church and speaking with the pastor. This is what we think we want to do. We want to really teach people about blood pressure, and we want to teach them a little bit about salt and the impact on blood pressure. We got buy-in from the minister. He then we told him what we wanted to do, which was we wanted to create a virtual reality intervention, but also couple that with education, which is one of the fortes that we do in the community,
Hmm.
and most with the intent of empowering the patients to become their own advocates, very much like what Mel talked about, very much like what Leah talked about. And he agreed, and we started off looking at foods. And so the plan was to have an evening meeting with congregants and just for fun, what's your favorite foods? No shame, tell us what your favorite foods are. And it turns out the first meeting, the pastor came down later in the evening and noticed that there were no men there, it was only women. And he said, this is not going to work because all that stuff they got on the wall, that's not my fave. You got to have another one. So he brought them in. And so we ended up with two groups of folk men and women, who put their best foot forward about their best foods. And then we had an odd um, number of people intentionally so that we ended up with a consensus to come up with a number of special foods. And we put those foods into a VR set. And that was part of our intervention. The other part of the intervention was to provide education. And in order to do that, we also had a group of congregants who helped us define what they wanted education about. We gave them a list of things. We told them what we'd like to do, but we had them help design the intervention. And so by the time the study started, we had buy-in. The other part of the study was we intended to give them a Fitbit so they could watch how many steps they walked and to teach them about blood pressure, teach them what is systolic, which is the top number, and how well the ventricle itself pumps blood forward up to the brain and out to the body and out to all the organs. And diastolic, which is how well the ventricles actually relax so that they can actually be fed through the coronary arteries. With hypertension, there is a inability of the muscle of the heart to do its job well, and the pressures after the vessels, in other words, after the heart, are very constricted. So the heart itself, you can imagine, gets big and has to pump harder, but then, like any other muscle, it can give out, right? So we gave a lot of education around that, and a number of um, topics that the congregants said they wanted to hear about from us. And we started the project.